Welcome to MWEB's Entrepreneur Zone. Today I've got Greg with me from ActionCoach and the Business Coach. Welcome, Greg.
Thanks, Paul.
Tell us a bit more about your background and your business.
Well, to be honest, I'm an ex-corporate junkie. So I've had probably about 15 years of corporate experience, gone through the ranks of starting companies. I started a link product company on the LISPs, worked as a CIO in the organization, and then headed myself through the organization to change management. So I had lots of fun dealing with change per se, but also got to a point in the career where I realized that changing corporate takes a long time. And I guess that was the one side. Timeousness of change was a problem. But on the other, for me, looking at the desire to change was also interesting. Because in corporate, often it's about what's in my back pocket, what's in it for me. So sometimes you don't necessarily get the results you want because of the individuals in the lower ranks basically having their decision-making process defined by their salary or their bonus structures. So I had an interesting time there, but realized I could actually achieve more. So I headed off and looked for something where I could deal with companies, where I could really make a fundamental difference, where I could sit with someone today and we can see the results tomorrow. And that's really where I moved into coaching and found ActionCoach.
And so that was quite a change for you, going from being in a corporate to being on your own.
Huge. Yeah, a fundamental change. It's for me, in terms of what I was doing in corporate, I was one of these big dominant influencers, moving into an environment where the behavior was totally different. As a coach, my behavior was one of how do I help small business and how do I influence the small business owners to really make small changes to get some big results. And trying to get that adaptation going was very difficult.
And how did you go about building your brand, building your market when you started?
Well, I think the first thing for me was obviously trying to find a brand that worked for me. So finding ActionCoach, sadly at that stage no one knew about it. So I'd bought into a franchise, but it was more about the culture. What I liked about the brand was that it was global. I had a network out there of 1,000 odd people that I could call on at any time. So that really appealed to me, and also there was a bit of traveling involved, which also I quite liked. But really taking that and then building myself out in the marketplace was just getting out there and making it happen. It was focusing on an outcome, focusing on the basics, and really getting out there and doing it. You know, knocking on the doors, picking up the phone, really sticking to a marketing plan and making it happen.
And you must have met some interesting businesses over the course of your journey.
Yeah, very, very interesting businesses. I think if I look at probably some of the strange ones, I don't want to give names, but I've dealt with diamond dealers from a coaching perspective, which I must say are very interesting. It's a different world, I must say, through to dealing with obviously with logistics companies and even hotel groups. You know, if I look at hotel groups, it's a plethora of challenges. You know, there's so much that can take place in that business and so many areas that they can focus on. Yeah, it's a wonderful environment to work in.
In terms of your own business and in the many businesses that you've seen, what are some of the key learnings that you would impart to people?
Probably for me, the biggest one is being focused on the outcome. You know, that is where I think, if I look at my client base and myself, where I failed in the past and where a lot of my clients, before I got to them, actually used to make mistakes, was they never actually had a fully focused outcome. And they would get too emotionally connected to the business. So they didn't have this emotional separation between themselves on the one side and the business on the other. So when something went wrong, they took everything personally, rather than saying, well, it doesn't actually matter. What I'm doing now, if a client leaves, I'm actually creating space for another client. There's a mindset shift. And if you're totally focused on that outcome, it doesn't matter what happens in the business on day to day. Because if someone leaves, you just find a new person and you replace them. And you keep moving toward that outcome because that's what it's about. So I'd say that's probably the biggie. And then secondly, the why. You know, why do I do this? What's in it for me? Why do I want to get to that outcome? What is it going to mean to me? You know, what is it going to mean to me in terms of rands and cents? What is it going to mean to me emotionally? Because if I can understand the why, then I can easily drive myself to achieve that outcome.
In my experience of having interviewed a few entrepreneurs, that why is often very different for different people. And how does that influence how they should run their business?
The why on the one side is very personal. So for some people, the why can be, I'm going away from pain. So I don't want to be bankrupt. I don't want to go back to where maybe they've come. So the why could be a driver, almost like a negative driver to move towards something positive. The other driver for somebody could be they want to do something more humanitarian. They want to create jobs and they want to save lives or something like that. But I think the key thing for me, it's about the law of precession. So what the law of precession talks about is that sometimes in order to succeed in business, you've got to go right angles to where you think you need to go to get the result. So if I think of Merck, the pharmaceutical company, for them, one of their measures is how many lives they save. So if they're focusing on saving lives, they'll make lots of money. So the same in business, if we can focus on creating jobs, if we can focus on customer service, if we can focus on all the stuff that typically people forget about, 9 times out of 10 we'll make a lot of money. So it's about focusing on the right areas, I guess.
In your experience in dealing with these small businesses, do you find that people that have a set goal versus people that are kind of more open, is there a difference in terms of the success rates?
Yeah, there is. I do have, I have met a few people who haven't really clarified a goal and have been successful.
Okay.
So I need to put that on the one side and make sure everyone is aware of that. And how they achieve that sometimes is by luck. The universe is aligned. Everything falls in place. Maybe the law of attraction works really well for them. But a lot of the other guys, it's about, if I have a goal on the table, I need to know the action steps. And typically, it's one of the reasons why people don't get to a goal is because they haven't articulated clearly enough what needs to be done. And if you haven't pinpointed each step of the way, it's very easy for you to get lost in the process and you can meander off and end up doing something totally different to what you want to achieve.
And with your role, it's about helping guide people along the steps that they have to take. That takes trust and relationship building. Give us some of the insight into that.
Well, yes, it's a very personal relationship. I must say, if I look at my client base, I get to know a lot about them. And you need to know a lot about an individual because I've really got to get into their head. I've got to understand their belief systems, their values. Because if I really want to help them move forward, they have to be open to that. They have to be open to me asking the tough questions. So it's not something that happens overnight. You can't just walk up to a coach and say, I'm going to trust you. It's just not going to happen. There is a process of working with an individual. I call it the dating period of coaching. Probably the first 3 months where you're really sussing each other out to understand, do I like this guy? Will I let them in? There are some people who are just totally open, but generally I tend to find that it takes a couple of months for someone to actually really open up. Then you can start helping them.
And your business particularly is based on yourself and your time. How do you manage that as a one in terms of growth and two in terms of just staying sane with the amount of hours that you have to work in a day?
That's structure. So it's the only way I actually survive is I have a default diary. So I have a plan, I have a default diary, and I stick to my default diary. So every week there's certain slots that say that's what I'm going to do for marketing, and I make sure I dedicate that time to marketing. Because if I really think about it, I've got about 9 different functions I have to perform. And if I don't stick to a rigid diary and perform those functions when I say I'm going to perform them, I'm never going to get to do the work. And then Saturday and Sunday becomes extra work days, which is a big challenge for me. So I think surviving is a problem. Growth for me is going to be probably even a bigger challenge because there's only so many hours in a day. So you get to a point where you say, well, how do I grow my business? Do I either maximize my rate per hour, which is the one variable, or I've got to leverage myself. So I either have to change my business model slightly, so I start doing more group workshops, or alternatively I have to start bringing in resources to come help me in the business to actually grow it that way. So there are models, but it's about to find the right one that works for you.
As you were saying, it's a case of, at the moment, it's yourself and there's the potential that you could go down the path of employing other people. But looking at a business where it's an individual, and both from your experience and from your coaching experience, what are some of the difficulties of starting a business where it's just you? And what's some of the advice that you'd give to other people that are a single person in a business?
And actually, I want to twist the question slightly, and I want to go to the point of, if there's an individual who leaves, let's say, employment, so they're employed by someone and leave, and now want to start their own business, we have to ask the question, why do these businesses fail? So if you look at the stats, I think they vary, but there's between 70 and 80% of businesses typically will fail in the first year. So we have to ask, well, why does that happen? And for me, it's quite simple because there's 2 elements to it. The one element is behavior. So an employee has an employee behavior. So a person who's an employee today comes to work, someone tells them what to do, and they do the job. When you become self-employed, which is, if I had to draw a ladder and there's one level up, to behave like a self-employed person is very different. You have to take on the full ownership, responsibility, accountability. Whereas when you're an employee, you were only accountable for doing the work. Now you're the full owner. You've got to bring on a whole host of new behaviors that possibly you don't have. You may find discipline is one of the big ones. Okay, so not having that discipline as a self-employed owner becomes very difficult to succeed. So for me, the behavior plays probably a good 60% of it. And on the other side, it's then, well, I don't have the skills. Once again, these guys go on their own, but they don't get the skill. So they don't understand how to do the financials. They don't know how to put a basic marketing plan together. They don't know how to go out there and actually engage. When they go to a networking event, they sit in the corner or they chat to their buddies. No one's actually taken them through a process of saying, well, let's agree on the outcome. Let's understand break-even. Let's understand your minimum costs and look at the cash flow and actually put a plan together. So to sort of answer your question, I really see it those two sides. Is people really need to focus on their behavior. Who do I need to be? Because if I know who I need to be, I can work on those behaviors and then I can succeed in that role. And on the other side, what don't I know and where are my gaps, and get some skill. Buy the book, go on the internet, Google it, do what you need to do to it. Go on a course if you have to get those skills.
In terms of coaching small businesses, how often do you find that the owner of the business is very tied to an idea and they won't let go of that, and that's stopping the growth?
I can't say that I've had too many of those situations. What I've had is I've had a lot of business owners where they've had a lot of ideas, okay, more so than just one that they want to focus on. I've almost seen the converse, is where I've got almost schizophrenic people out there. They just want to do so much. They want to be everything to everyone, as opposed to honing in on one particular area. So I've really seen the other side of the coin.
So it's kind of creating a focus is an important thing.
Yeah, very much so. Creating that focus and honing on one element. When I talk to business owners, and I did an expo a while ago, and I got the guys to raise their hands, and I said, how many of you have one business? And must have been half the room. And I said, how many have two businesses? And that was probably like 30% of the room. And I said, how many have three businesses? It must have been about 10%. And I said to the 10% of these guys, how many of those three, or of you with your hands up, of that 10%, of your businesses, how many of them have given you lots of profit? And they all put their hands down. And I turned to them, I said, well, here's half your problem. If you're not focusing on one business, getting it working, making the money, moving on to the next one, getting it working, making the money, moving on to the next one, you're never going to succeed. Then you're going to fragment your time. And you're going to be spending a third of your time on three businesses, and you're possibly not going to get the results that you want.
Moving back to the topic around building your brand and your reputation. Your business is purely built on your reputation. What's been your experience in how to achieve that, and what advice would you give to small business owners? Okay,
take a risk. Nothing comes to anybody who sits on their ass. So part of it is backing yourself and really getting out there and choosing who you want to be. So probably define that persona that you want to be in a couple of years, put it out there, look at the law of attraction, get that working for you, but really work hard on that and really back yourself. Because if you back yourself, two things can happen. You can fail, okay, or you can achieve the result. If you don't achieve the result, then you can say, well, what did I learn? And there will be a whole chunk of learning for you which you can take forward to the next time around. But if you don't back yourself, you're always going to stay exactly where you're at. So take that risk, but make it an educated risk.
You talk about failure, and that must be a big part of what you have to coach businesses on. What's been your experience of how successful business owners deal with failure?
Well, if I look at how successful guys deal with it, they don't see it as failure, number one. So the guys who are really successful say, well, it's a hurdle. So for them, I didn't achieve an outcome. So I started here and I wanted to get there and I didn't get there. So then I can understand, well, why didn't I get there? And I can take a learning from the particular situation. Plus, those particular individuals have an outcome that they're after, which means that it's very simple. This strategy didn't work, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to try another strategy. So really, business is about applying a whole host of strategies to get to an end goal or an end result. And it's about testing and measuring those strategies as you go through the process to know which one works and which one doesn't. Sadly, though, most businesses don't achieve a goal. They've applied all their efforts in 1,000 different ways, and they don't know which strategy they applied worked and which one didn't. Where successful businesses test and measure each of those little elements as they go along.
Greg, you've been coaching for a number of years now. What's next for you?
Sure, probably running a coaching business. I think being the coach is great, but I think the next step for me is going to be to really branch out and seeing, well, how do I get to 1 million companies? How do I go out there and influence 1 million people so that I can help them in their businesses and really help them grow? Because if we can create jobs in 1 million businesses out there, well, we're doing something for South Africa. And I think really that's where I'm going to. So step out of coaching, mentor coaches, and see where I can get in terms of incubators, getting into large corporates to say, how do we really take the knowledge that we need out there and really help the little guys get bigger?
That brings us on to our rapid fire question.
Cool.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
Outcome focused. Focus on that outcome 100%, know what it is, and understand the law of precession.
And your best moment as an entrepreneur?
Being on the front cover of Entrepreneur magazine. That was a great experience, and also being chosen as a business coach. There's 2 of them.
And your biggest mistake?
Coming out of corporate and thinking that I can go and get business from corporate.
What do you look for in people that you work with?
That's the passion, it's the heart, and the work ethic.
And what does an entrepreneur need to succeed?
An open mind, willing to test and measure, and to take some risks. You've got to understand that if you want to get a reward, you actually have to put activity out there. And sometimes you've got to step out of your comfort zone.
What's your biggest inspiration as a small business owner?
Helping change. That's what inspires me. It's when I deal with the business owner and afterwards, when you've achieved a result, the person has a tear in the eye and they say thank you.
What would you do differently?
Stick to the basics and keep it simple, and business is easy.
What makes South Africa a good place to be an entrepreneur?
Oh, opportunity. There's all these opportunities, but how do we help? How do we get out there to help? There's every corner, there's something that you can do in South Africa. There's someone you can help. There's a person asking for help. But it's about time and resources, and how do we get out there and actually make that influence?
And what keeps you up at night?
What keeps you up at night is, will I achieve my goals?
And what gets you going in the morning?
Helping the individuals that I'm coaching.
Greg, thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
And thank you. We look forward to the coming weeks. We will bring you further South African entrepreneurs. I'm Paul Hobden. Thank you and goodbye.